Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I wanted to take just a minute on this podcast episode to tell you a little bit about the online course that we are offering now, the Bit Course 2.0, Understanding How and Why Bits Function. You can find it at the website, thebitcourse.com, which will be linked in the show notes. This is a very comprehensive course. We've got two different versions. There's a masterclass version where weekly we have live calls and go over the modules and the study guide. That course has been running 25 to 30 hours over the course of 7 weeks. If you take that version, you're also eligible to go through our BIT certification program and take that test. It's at no additional cost if you want to add consulting about bits to your repertoire of body work or whatever else you might be doing. We also will have an evergreen version that you can take anytime you work at your own pace. It is less expensive. It's also a lot less content. You don't have the weekly Zoom calls with me. Those are going about 2 to 2.5 hours each week. So the masterclass course winds up 25, 30 hours long. The evergreen course you're going to do in 12 to 15, something like that. So check it out. You can go to thebitcourse.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get a 30-minute video on the foamy mouth and all of the implications of that, as well as 5 or 6 articles that I've written regarding bits. Get a feel for the content. This will absolutely be some of the best money and time you have ever spent on your horsemanship journey, I assure you. And it is not discipline specific. We cover just about every aspect of the horse world that you can think of. Our guest today is Mr. Kerry Thomas. Kerry is a renowned equine therapist, educator, and consultant specializing in equine behavioral psychology and the application of cognitive theory to horse training, horse selection, and breeding programs. He is widely recognized for his expertise in the field of equine behavior, PTSD, and trauma assessment, and is the developer of the groundbreaking sensory soundness theory and sensory mapping. His innovative methods for understanding herd dynamics and creating protocols based upon the natural behavior of horses is considered by many as amongst the more progressive approaches in the world today. Thomas created the Thomas herding technique in 2008, which is a methodology that focuses on building trust and communication between horses and humans through understanding their natural instincts and behavior patterns. In 2011, he started THT Bloodstock to accommodate international thoroughbred clients, through which he and then partner Peter Dink began evaluating the herd dynamic patterns of motion in the Kentucky Derby horses. With founding of sensorysoundness.com, Kerry conducts clinics, creates educational programs, and lectures internationally, helping horses, owners, trainers, and riders develop better relationships with their horses. Kerry started his quest for knowledge as a young man through years of independent field research studying wild horses around the globe and the unique predator-prey relationships in the natural world. His insights have been used to find some of the modern era's best equine athletes, such as Runhappy, Beauty Generation, City of Light, to name a few. Kerry has been featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for his groundbreaking work and is often quoted or featured in international publications, including the Barefoot Horse Magazine, the Arabian Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and the Las Vegas Review Journal. Kerry has also been featured on television, radio, and has a special series of podcasts on herd dynamics with Dr. Shelley Appleton. Dr. Shelley is how I came to know about you, Kerry. So I'm glad that we're getting to have this chat today. And in addition to having sensory soundness with his wife Daphne, Kerry is also the author of multiple books, including Horse Profiling, The Secret to Motivating Equine Athletes. And he is now starting off on a 6-book series called View from the Hoof. He also has the podcast with his wife, Beyond the Hoof, and a new subsidiary of that called Destination of Hope. That's a mouthful, Kerry. So
yes,
it's my pleasure to talk with you today. How are you?
I'm doing good, and I appreciate that. I've definitely been. I can't be accused of doing things in simplicity. I certainly I like if the stove has 4 burner tops, I want 4 more. That's always been my nature. And I have to say, Daniel, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here today, and appreciate you reaching out to me. certainly respect your work and following your work. And you mentioned Dr. Shelley Appleton. I would be remiss if I didn't extend a special thank you to her. And she's a wonderful person, a great lecturer, horsewoman, clinician, and just a wonderful friend. And I certainly always appreciate our collaborations together that we had in the past and anything we do in the future. But wanted to make sure I said thank you and appreciation to all that she and her partner Simon have done for myself and my wife Daphne and I. And it's always nice to be able to say thanks to someone publicly who've done so many nice things for other people.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence about her. I'm not sure, but anyway. No, she's great. Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. All right. Well, Kerry, we start everybody off with our lightning round questions, and these are for points and prizes, so you want to be on your A game here.
Okay.
If if you were a Jedi, what % chance is there that you would misuse the Force?
Um, if I was a Jedi, boy, one of my favorite movie series, I think I would probably misuse the Force 35% of the time, probably.
Okay, I like it. A little moderation there.
Yeah, yeah.
Morning or evening?
Oh, definitely morning. I want to be up before the chickens and sometimes in bed before the chickens.
Right there with you. How long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
It depends on the cookie, but a dunker I am. So if it's an Oreo, I got to make sure it's good and soggy. If it's a homemade peanut butter cookie, it doesn't take that long. So it really just depends on the cookie.
Mm-hmm. What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you admire in someone else and wish you did have?
Gosh, there's a lot of different things that I'm not good at that I admire in other people. I think you know I have to say five-star eventers, elite thoroughbred jockeys, folks who can folks who have the natural feel in the saddle to mentally engage with different horses, on across the board, who can hop into horse to horse and become one with the horse. That's a very special thing to combine your physical and your emotional together in saddle and be one with the horse. And that's something that people do by feel and is natural, and I certainly admire that.
What would you say is the most important quality of a horseman or horsewoman?
I think the most important quality really is the ability to realize that you see with your feel, not with your eyes. Having the being humble enough to realize that you're in their world, they're not in ours, when it comes to communication, and to be able to just divest yourself of things that you've learned in the past about a horse to understand the horse that you're with.
I like it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
Oh, I'm real good at a trailer. I can back a trailer 10. I cut my teeth in construction with my dad's business, and so I've backed up many trailers at a very young age that wouldn't be quote unquote legal today, as far as the driving age anyway,
Yep, same here. Both my,
and wagons too, of course.
uh-huh. Bay or sorrel?
Well, I'm colorblind, so I want the darkest horse possible.
Okay. He's easier to spot for you, huh?
That's it.
I know we'll talk a little bit about this in the future, but would you consider that to be a particular advantage or something that has influenced the way that you figuratively see horses?
100%. Yes, yes, it has been a blessing.
Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Really? Okay, we
Yeah.
don't get a lot of cat people. So
Well,
what's your cat preference?
well, so here's the thing. I love all animals, of course, and was raised with both. Growing up, we had beagles, and we actually had when I was younger, we had a Alaskan Malamute Husky mixed with a wolf, a captive wolf. So his name was Bandon. He was an interesting fellow. He would howl at nighttime sometimes. But I've always been fascinated with the unique predator predatory aspects of cats. Cats they don't really need you. They want you around. They want you around. If they don't, they don't. And yeah, I've always kind of admired the just admired cats. So I'm more of a cat person.
Here's
As
a
odd as
little
that
fun
may
fact.
as odd as that may sound, I am a cat person. Yes.
No, that's fine. A little fun fact: a cat will eat your corpse faster than any other pet. If you die in the house and no one finds you, the cat will start eating your nose right away. Dog will go a good while, but a cat, you're on the menu immediately.
Well, that's
So,
good to know. That way you don't stink up the house.
that's right. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No. Oh my goodness, no. No, no, no. And,
Are
and
you a
matter of
cook?
fact, that's a deal breaker for me. If you put pineapple on your pizza, I'm out.
There's a guy, I don't remember his name, but I follow him on Instagram. But he started an entire channel on that premise of trying to find the most ridiculous toppings for pizza that he could. So
Oh,
pineapple is like his one on a scale of 1 to 10. He just goes off the charts, and he's, according to him at least, he's found some really interesting combinations of things you never would have thought to put together, but work in the end. So
well, that'd be fun to explore.
I think so. Yeah. You could always go to Burger King if it doesn't work out, right?
That's right.
Are you a cook?
I love to cook. I do. But my wife has certainly tops me in that. My wife Daphne is a phenomenal cook, but I do enjoy cooking, and I love, I guess it's maybe typical, but I love being out on the grill. We got married in June this year, in June 2024, and one of our guests gave us a Blackstone grill, which was on my wish list, and I had been in heaven for quite some time since that. So, but I enjoy cooking. Yes, I do. But if I'm cooking, just stay out of the kitchen because you might. I just want you to eat it. I don't want you to see how I make
Fair enough.
it.
Do you have a horse industry related pet peeve?
Cool. I mean, probably several if I really sat down and thought a lot about it. I think like we all do. I mean, I guess one of the pet peeves I actually have, I think, is maybe not directly related to the people in the industry, but maybe how the perception of different industries look upon each other. Like, I spent the bulk of my early career working in the private sector of thoroughbred racing. And, now that I have branched out and I'm doing a whole different, still working in that sector, but I'm doing a lot more public work, as far as clinics and lectures and things like that, and with eventing and dressage and you name it. And when I do every different industry or discipline, hub sometimes has a bad story or a bad taste in the mouth about their opposing what they see as an opposing industry. Like I have people tell me, how can you be involved in racing when it's so cruel and so on and so forth and vice versa? And I say, well, number one, there is ugly in every family. There's also a lot of good in every family. And, we are an equine family and we are an equine industry as a whole. And to me, the pet peeve is finger pointing one to the other as if the industry that we're in is completely, sainthood. When you need to take care of things in your house before you worry about what your neighbors are doing. And so for me, the lack of not entirely across the board, but the lack of collaboration between the disciplines and peremptorily saying that, well, racing is bad, dressage is bad, barrel racing is bad, whatever the case may be. I think that working together and putting the horse first as the premise should be where we all are, despite our industry, and there shouldn't be this antagonistic rub at one to the other. If we're going to actually advance the equine industry as a whole and make the world better for horses, we have to work together across disciplines. And that, to me, is a pet peeve that I spend some of my time answering questions of, I can't believe you love horses so much that you're working in this industry too, or it's like, yeah, I love horses. That's why I'm working in all of the industries because I love horses. And I feel like I have a responsibility to that. So that to me is a pet peeve. It's like, look, back the truck up and let's stop looking at what makes us different and let's start looking at what makes us common and how we can become stronger. that's kind of a long-winded answer to that, but it's kind of how I feel, you know.
No, I completely agree with that, except barrel racers. I think it's perfectly legitimate to shit on barrel racers. They deserve every bit of it. But other than that, yeah.
Right.
Uh, do you have any favorite words of wisdom?
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite words is actually a slogan that we have on our shirts and stuff at our store. I'm all a positive thinker. My glass is always half full, and I'm always looking at the bright side of things. And for me, I always remind people and remind myself that the first step in realizing your dreams is believing that you can. And you know, I have that on the bottom of my email signature. We have that on shirts. It's something that I have to remind myself of as well, but I always try to take that with me and share with other people.
I like it.
And the other part of that, Daniel, if I may, is that I try to remind people that if you're looking outside yourself for your own validation of your truth, then maybe it's not really your truth. You know, if you need the outside world or someone else to validate who you are or validate your truth, perhaps it's not really your truth. You know, I try to remind people that your happiness should not be outsourced. You know, your happiness starts with the person in the mirror, and uh, you know, that's not something important. That's for me. I try to share this on a human level. You know, so I just wanted to share that with you too.
Absolutely. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Um, Smooth peanut butter
Okay.
because I don't like when I spread it and it just bumps all over my bread.
That just means you're spreading too thin of a layer. It's got to be like 3/8 of an inch or something. You got to have a
Well,
layer
yeah,
of peanut. Yeah.
I guess that's probably true.
Like, like I've never. We both have some Australian friends and all, and the way they do the Vegemite where they just like it's just like a hint of a wisp of a whatever
Yep,
layer on there. Of course, that stuff's pretty strong, but
it is
uh,
pretty strong. Yeah, it's like eating
yeah,
tar.
a little bit with a lot of salt in it.
Yeah.
Least favorite barn chore.
Least favorite barn chore. You know, standing around and waiting. Like, you know, sometimes you have that time in between where, especially up here in the north where it gets really cold, like right now. You know, I think standing around, well, I should say to extend that point, chipping out and trying to get ice out of water buckets or unfreeze water lines is probably the thing that I despise the most because you know, I'm at the point in my life where if I never saw snow again, I'd be very happy. But because I'm looking after my mother as caregiver up here in Pennsylvania, yeah, I'm here for now. So I'm stuck with the wintertime.
My This is one of my perpetual arguments with my wife. We got a house in mind that we'd like to build, and she wants an old plantation style home, which is pier and beam. And I have told her, like, me being on my back under a house working on wiring or thawing plumbing, like that's a deal breaker. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna do that. I've been there, I've done that, got the t-shirt, wore it out. This is one
Yeah.
of those decisions you're not gonna get to make. We can have a house that looks like that, but we're not gonna actually deal with that. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
no,
anyway.
I had to take your side on that.
Would you tell us something unexpected about
About me, something unexpected about me is I never planned on being in the horse industry.
you? Okay, we'll
Yep,
get into that more
we'll get into
later.
that, but it was never my plan, yes. But here we are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Life throws you curveballs. Um,
Hmm.
if you could choose any new skill, superpower, or ability, what would you choose? And this could
That
be
would be
anything:
yeah,
flying,
well
X-ray
that would be
vision.
that would be easier. The capacity to emotionally heal people who are hurting, to emotionally provide comfort is something that I would love to be able to do more for people, and I wish that there was a magic way that you could touch more people. So that's I'm a big soft-hearted kind of fella, and other people's pain I feel very, very deeply, emotional pain. So I very sensitive to that. So I do all I can at all times to be more of a positive, something good in the dark hole,
Hmm.
And I wish I had the ability to touch more people.
Thoughts or feelings?
As context of, you mean as far as projecting
Yeah, or just do you view yourself as more of a thoughtful, logical, rational, analytical type of
feelings?
a person? Or yeah, which
I read the room moment to moment and respond to it accordingly. So I'm all about feelings because that way I we're not subject to our predisposed thought processes. If we allow ourselves to feel, then we can better assimilate and adapt to the changes in the environment that are immediate without assuming what they're going to be, because assumptions can get us into trouble.
what would you have been professionally if not for in the horse business?
A professional baseball coach at the major league level.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that was my early dream.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
I'm decisively indecisive. Does that make sense? Like I will but once I make a decision, then as my wife will tell you, I'm very, very stringent upon that. If I give things a lot of thought, and I try not to make knee-jerk decisions or decisions based purely on the emotions of the moment. I like to let things sit and let them roll around in my mind for a while. And but when I make a decision, then that decision is made.
Cold showers or cold food forever? Which would you pick?
Cold shower.
There with you. What is the best smell in the barn?
Alfalfa.
Okay, so
Fresh, fresh cut alfalfa, but really, I guess that wouldn't be necessarily in the barn, but in the barn, gosh, the sweet smell of horses. I mean, I think like a lot of people do, just rubbing my hand across the horse's, withers and neck, and just smelling that sweet. The smell of horses to me is just, it's almost like its own cologne.
mhm.
Not everybody though agrees with me because they sell it smells. You smell like the barn, and I'm like, thank you. It
Yeah.
means I had a good day.
Uh, so you're in Pennsylvania. Do y'all
Yep.
have, like, when I think of alfalfa, I'm thinking more the Southwest in terms of growing, and that would be a long haul to ship to y'all. Am I wrong on that? Do y'all have alfalfa in your area?
Yeah, yeah, we
Or
we do. I mean, there are there's alfalfa obviously that comes in from Idaho and places like that you can buy here, but there is local alfalfa as well. Yeah, Pennsylvania. So where I live and born and raised in Chester County, real close to Lancaster County, which is an incredible growing belt for the Amish community and farmers here. I'm in a farming community. So yeah, there's quite a bit of not as much as the vastness that you have out west, but there is some really high quality alfalfa here to be had.
cool, cool. I think more like Timothy and that kind of stuff, orchard grass.
Yeah, well
In
that's certainly the majority. Yes,
sweet, salty, or spicy.
all three. Can we combine them in an all three?
You absolutely can.
I
Especially if you
I
have a
love
Blackstone. You got two big spatulas and wham, wham, wham. Here we have a pile of
yeah,
all of it, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
My favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature. I'm fascinated with that whole era as far as studying it, and I would say, uh, like the deep sea squid is kind of a fascinating creature to me. I think there's a high level of intelligence. There's so many, we've only explore such a small, tiny percentage of the deep oceans to even know what's there. And I think the unknowns of that fascinate me, but those creatures of the deep really do fascinate me.
Just the survival of a soft-bodied animal under that kind of pressure is mystifying to me for sure.
Yep.
20,000 leagues under the sea and all of that good stuff. And have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Not while sober. No, I'll just leave that shelf right there for a little fun.
That
Uh,
sounds good.
no, not that I can say, but I think it would be pretty awesome, though.
It would be interesting. Um, okay, well that wraps up our our lightning round questions. Let me just add your score up over here. Kerry, I'm coming up with 4,366 points, which makes you our reigning champion. Nobody has scored that high in the history of the game yet. And that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
I'll take an awkward silence.
Well, Kerry, let me thank you for choosing the awkward silence. That's always my favorite selection of any guest. I absolutely love those types of things. But why don't you give us kind of the 30,000-foot view of what it is you are doing in the horse business right now?
So, my specialty is as I specialize in equine psychology, and what does that really mean? Um, Actually, I just released a blog post yesterday, the last blog post on my website for 2024 that addresses that very thing. um, I specialize in identifying the characteristics, the traits and the tendencies and the characteristics that make up who the horse is. I'm hyper focused on understanding and analyzing the operating system running the machine. I'm 56 years old. I spent the better part of my life early on studying wild horses in nature. That's how I cut my teeth and studying, the predator-prey interaction, as you mentioned early on. And so I became very fascinated with Mother Nature's laboratory, understanding horses from basically like the book series I'm writing now, by taking a view from the hoof, not taking a view from the human. I knew nothing about horses except for the cursory things that we know growing up in an area that has horses around. I was not raised with horses, so my fascination and my study all came from Mother Nature's perspective by studying, embarking on wild horse um, research projects independently funded by me and my father's construction business that I would work in and then save money to go back out west. And for me, the whole thing of herd structure, herd dynamics, the very unique communication that takes place between horses, and not just between horses, but between horses and their environment. How horses communicate with each other, their environment, and how they communicate themselves into that. There's a lot of different things that take place. There's inter-herd communication. There is horse to environment communication. There's horse to horse communication. There's a lot of collaborations that happen that have multiple layers to them. And it's been my life's passion to discover how these things operate, how they function, how horses learn, where they are on their herd structure, what that means in our relationship with them, how do we properly and thoughtfully coach them from their herd dynamic point of view. I always remind people that if you're not working with the natural herd dynamics, you're working against them. And so I specialize in everything that is between the horse's ears, basically, from their sensory interpretations of their environment and their communication capacity, their emotional stress tolerances, finding what those markers are, how mental fatigue affects horses. And for our purposes in the domesticated world, I always say one of our big sayings is be the bridge, not the block. And what that means really is, bridging the gap between the natural herd dynamic and our domesticated world. Because we live with horses, they live with us, but it's still a parallel universe when it comes to communication. And, I remind people that it's not the horse's job to understand our nature, it's our job to understand their nature. And in a nutshell, that is what my 100% effort is identifying who that horse is, that understanding and unraveling the mystery of the operating system running that machine.
Well, I definitely wanted to get into some of the wild horse stuff with you. So we had kind of a private chat about this when we were young boys. Both of us were really big fans of like Marty Stouffer and the Mutual of
Oh, yeah.
Omaha Wild Kingdom
Yep.
programs and all of that. And so I'm picturing you out there in a blind over a water hole or something, watching some Mustangs on a hill. And then Dr. Shelley had mentioned some pretty interesting observations, ways that you had of looking at the herd and determining who the real leader of the herd was. It wasn't necessarily the loud and obnoxious one that most people would pick. And also, why don't you get into a little bit of that and kind of explain that to us?
Well, and yes, to that point, I mean, excuse me, I had the complete pleasure and fortune to study horses from, Wyoming, Montana, the Pryor Mountain Mustangs, all the way across the globe to the Snowy Mountains in Australia and the Brumbies with Dr. Shelley Appleton. That was a special time as well in 2023. And, to your point and to what she had mentioned, one of the most resounding things that stood out to me early on was that, I began to realize, okay, I'm studying the mountain lions, I'm studying the grizzly bears. I was fascinated with the interplay between the predators and prey animals in changing environments and how they responded to the changes in the environment as well as one another's movements and the offensive and defensive nature of their behavioral characteristics. And in studying, even bison herds, out west, and elk and mule deer and so on and so forth, and the antelope. And oh, by the way, there's Mustang herds out there that are far away from human touch. What allows these species to operate in a herd and to survive without human intervention? What is it about the leadership and the hierarchical scale of herd animals in general that allows them to survive and evade predators? And the bottom line is there is a hierarchy on purpose. It's Mother Nature's plan. You have to have the large majority of horses fall into the middle, range of the herd structure, which means they don't have the most elite emotional intelligence. They have a high degree of mutual dependencies intertwined with their psychologies. Basically, they have their strengths and their vulnerabilities that ties them together. And a lot of that is predicated upon their sensory efficiency. And what I began to realize was the most emotionally intelligent horses were the ones that were able to disappear in plain sight. They were not, they never expressed themselves without a purpose. And that's how they conceal themselves. Because if you think about it, if you're a predator, okay, and I'm that mountain lion up on the hill, right, up on the butte looking out over at my prey. What am I looking for? I'm looking for what stands out to me. I'm looking for the infirm, the old, the young, the animals that stand out of the crowd. And what oftentimes sets these animals apart from their herd is the way they communicate. So the lowest animals in the herd speak the loudest physically because they don't have the psychological acumen to elevate themselves within the herd structure. They have to use physical expressions to try to maneuver themselves and to state their case. Well, what that does then is that by proxy makes them a target and protects the leadership. Because how nature protects her leadership is basically to make it camouflage or make it almost invisible to the predatory eye. So, that does not change regardless of whether it is in domesticated circumstances or wild circumstances. That is natural horse behavior. That's herd structure. Um, we in the domesticated world have thrown many, many monkey wrenches into all this. So it is like a kaleidoscope of ingredients that come together when I'm evaluating horses in the domesticated world. It's so much easier to identify horses in nature than it is to identify horses and where they fit in our manicured, if you will, herd structures and domestication. But there are fundamental truths that still shine through. And that was one of the most profound. And once I found that Rosetta Stone, if you will, to herd structure and communication, everything else began to present itself with more clarity as far as herd structure. I discovered that there are two different dynamics that happen inside the equine psyche. There is the male and the female psyche has different makeups, obviously. Male psyche is on the average 75% individual herd dynamic. That is because of their job in nature. So they have a one-to-one type of linear type of focus, typical for men, right? And then the fillies and mares, brood mares, the girls in the family, they have a more group dynamic is more pronounced in them. So they're 75% group dynamic, which is I'm more busybody. I'm more aware of things around me. I'm more aware of the gossip, if you will. And 25% of their psychology is on the individual thing. So what that does, though, that 75-25 makes 100. And that's why you have in the natural herd structure, you have a lead stallion who has certain responsibilities, and you have a lead mare who has certain responsibilities. And so they together make 100% of emotional intelligence by coming together. And we have, to say the least, disrupted a lot of that in our efforts to create and curate our herds at home. And so we run into a lot of different problems from that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
no, it gives me some tangents to ask you about for sure. So just ending with the last thing you said there, it wouldn't be uncommon at all if you went to a lot of facilities where they'll have it separated boys and girls. Does that affect negatively the emotional balance of those horses, where the geldings are missing the feminine side of things and the fillies and mares are missing what the boys are bringing to the table? How would that organize itself in your head?
well, it does create a lot of disruptions from the natural herd hierarchy and that natural structure. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that we have is too early of. No, I just give you an example. I mean, we could talk about a multiplicity of things, but one of my one of my pet peeves, I guess we could go back to, is too early, and I mean the T00, too early, or double O, too early weaning of horses to fit into a paradigm of sales structure or training structure, or taking a young horse, a mentally underdeveloped horse, away from the family structure too early interrupts their natural growth patterns. Okay, and so not every horse weaning time is going to be the same, and every horse psychologically, just like a person, develops at a different rate. And if they have an incomplete sensory system, if they're still overly outsourcing and dependent to funnel their interpretations of their environment through their mother or through, in the wild, their family structure, and you remove them from that, now you have imparted in that young horse a sense of isolation and separation anxiety that is a scar that will then interrupt and affect their natural growth patterns going forward. Just so many different things. For me, I try to really, really hard, and I will always try really, really hard to remind people that, we're dealing with, and we know this, but I don't think enough people, and I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong, but I don't think enough people fully incorporate this into their processes, that we're dealing with an emotionally reactive and an emotional being, if you will, an emotional animal that is hypersensitive to their environment and the changes in their environment. And they're also hypersensitive to what we present to them and how we present it to them. And so, again, it is the operating system running that machine. And when we disrupt that, if we're going to be responsible for interrupting that process, then we are then becoming responsible for enriching that process. And a lot of times, I see big farms that do breeding, and of course, they'll either sell the broodmares and weanlings at a sale, and they sell them separately, or that kind of thing. It's just like, or you'll take at a certain age because, hey, we have a sales schedule to get to, so you have to be weaned by this date, whether you're ready for it or not. And we're going to throw you in a field of 15 acres with 30 of your closest buddies or 30 of your closest friends that you'd never met before, with a couple of surrogate supervising adults, maybe, and let you develop. So what the horse is lacking is life skills. They are, there are certain things that only horses can teach other horses. The horses need to learn how to be horses first. They need to be given the time to learn how to be horses first, and not be thrown right into wholeheartedly our environment without some enrichment processes. So, and I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but it's not across the board, but I see it too often that a lot of the problems that I run into as an equine psychologist and the horses I evaluate that are older horses that have a lot of physical talent, they have what they're dealing with and what the person is dealing with. There's a lot of emotional trauma that has happened along the way that has accumulated. And so their sensory systems are incomplete. Their associations to the things in their environment are predicated upon other associations and layered and layered and layered that were either things done to them or not done to them or whatever the case may be, but you have associations. So, you're dealing with an animal that doesn't have reason. Their emotional intelligence stops at the associative level. They associate things with this. And then that association begins to transform into an anticipation. And once we get to the anticipated process, when we get to the anticipatory response mechanism, the gig is up because now it's ingrained. Associations, we can still steer. Okay, we can still manicure, we can still curate associations, we can still layer on top of that. But when a horse begins to anticipate, they skip over the associative aspect. And this is a natural psychological process imparted in the horse by Mother Nature that helps them survive in the natural world. If you think about it, horses a young horse in the wild has to be able to discriminate between a sagebrush blowing across the prairie, or a mountain lion jumping out and coming after them. They can't be running around like idiots at every little thing that blows around, right? So they begin to associate, and then they learn to anticipate in certain environments. So that keeps them safe. It keeps them hidden, in our domesticated world, that can become our antagonist to training and coaching and, trying to get a horse to even be the best version of themselves if we get to that point. And then we have to work on unraveling that and creating different types of associations, which there's many different ways that I do that. But, there's so many different psychological parameters that it fascinates me. Obviously, I wouldn't have dedicated my life to this. And I enjoy helping every horse and every person who loves their horses build better relationships. And it starts with a deeper understanding of what's really happening here, not what we think is happening, because what you see is probably just the result, the exhaust of something that's already been building up for a long time before you see it. And don't get me started on just going right to equipment. Sometimes people put equipment on a horse to try to fix a problem when they're not dealing with something that can be fixed by that, as far as long term.
Absolutely. So would it be fair to summarize that in your expert opinion, Lord of the Flies is not the best weaning strategy we can come up with? Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah, I think that would be something that we can probably lean on.
What with the understanding that it depends is the correct answer. Kind of the industry standard is weaning colts between 4 and 6 months. Would you say that that's pretty much never a good game plan, that it's more of an 8 to 10 month thing, or
Yeah, well, we have to remember, just it's not uncommon for us as ourselves, is that the male psychology tends to mature at a different rate than the female psychology. So um, the boys, on average, will need a little bit more time than the girls, and so the young colts and the young fillies, they mature differently. And this, of course, depends on where they begin to fall on the herd structure, and it depends on their environment. There's a lot of things that depend upon that, but by the laws of nature, yes, um, that would be true in my opinion. And to me, it's just that's just nothing but just a simple fact of natural life.
okay? So I definitely have, and I don't know if I told you, I take notes while I'm doing this, so I'm not playing on my phone or something over here. I'm just capturing thoughts before they
And
disappear.
that's all right.
Um,
I don't want to bore you.
no, no, not at all. So I mean, you brought up a lot of things I want to question. So like I typically have a herd around here, running on 45 acres of somewhere between 20 and 30 horses. So I get to see a lot of herd dynamics,
Hmm.
at least within a domesticated setting. But
Right.
one of the things that I have noticed, first of all, is that I have a herd of, let's say, 30 horses, but that herd will actually be made up of 3 or 4 mini herds. So
You're
there's kind of
100% right.
a main herd,
Yes,
and then you have these little sort of,
you got your pods.
yeah, little pods off to the side. And
Yep.
one of the oddities I've always, I don't know if it's an oddity, I mean, I guess it's completely natural, but geldings are way more likely to pair up, and like you'll have these two buddies and they're never more than 20 feet apart out there, where the
Mhm.
mares are more likely to be in various places. They're not going to necessarily always be next to the same horse. They kind
Yeah.
of roam around a little bit more, even if it's just within the little mini herds. But the
Hmm.
geldings seem to be more glued to a particular horse than the mares are, in my experience. So how would that play in with the male female psychology? I guess that to me, that's almost, these are always geldings. Not that I have a lot of loose stallions, but I've always thought of it more of the bachelor herds. Those tend to not be the more
Yeah.
alpha kind of mares, and so they just get stuck over here,
Well,
these three guys.
we have created. Well, you just brought up a good point, and I actually just did a on our YouTube channel and asked Kerry a question that I answered was about this very similar topic. And essentially, what we have done in domestication is we have created a third herd structure, if you will. We have created a third wheel to the motorcycle. We added a cart by creating and having geldings. So obviously, everyone knows that a lot of it is predicated upon when the horse was gelded and things like that. But that's not the only thing it is lenient upon, should I say, lean on, is also where they would have been by nature in the herd structure, even if they stayed, stallions or entire, however you want to call it. And what we have done is we have created kind of a middle range where geldings fall into um, they're almost like chess pieces that you can they're like jokers in a deck of cards where they can find a fit within herd structure relatively easy because they really don't have the drive, I should say, to really push and elevate themselves. They're kind of like, well, okay, I'll fit here. This is good. They just A horse seeks two things in life, unlike a predator. Horses and prey animals in general seek harmony with their environment and contentment with their peers. And geldings are shining examples of that because we basically interrupt some of their psychology by making them geldings. And for whatever the reasons are, and there's nothing wrong, I'm not saying anything wrong with that because geldings are great, but we do interrupt some of the psychological processes, and not the psychological processes, but the emotional energy behind them, that drive behind them can be kind of mitigated. So they kind of fall into this middle plane, and so they are more malleable, where they can kind of be inserted to this group or they can be inserted to this group, but by and large, they feel most comfort with each other, um, because of the way that their herd dynamic puzzle has been shaped by being gelded. And most geldings are gelded for, I mean, at least in my experience, a lot of geldings become geldings because they're not going to become stallions. Whether they're quote unquote seen as too hard to deal with, so they become geldings, or just their pedigree, and we just don't need the testosterone in the barn because it's not going to do us any good anyway, right? So these are horses that are generally mid to lower mid-level psychologies as far as herd structure goes, just by nature. And so when you take a horse that's that way, a male horse, and then you take away their testosterone and all those things that go with it, they kind of become they find themselves in a psychological purgatory, that they just kind of stay in a spot, and they just really want to be harmonious and content at pretty much all times, and just kind of happy to be there type of horses. So that's why they pair up, because they communicate very well with each other, and there's less of a struggle for, they don't view one another as hierarchy rivals. Okay, they view each other as, hey, we're both kind of like extras in the play, and we're just happy to be here, kind of thing. From a herd, if we had the like word herd structure and natural herd structure, so they do pair up, most commonly, and they work well in many different situations. Like, oh, we'll send you with a gelding. He likes everybody. Well, yeah, he likes everybody because he just wants to fit. He doesn't want to bring attention to himself.
So I guess since we're talking about the boys, one of the other things I was going to bring up was convenience sake around many operations leads to the isolating of stallions. And in my experience, this is one of the worst things that you can do for the sort of mental health or
Yes,
or even
it's like being put
aggression.
into emotional jail.
Yeah. And so I've never been one to do that. I've the stallions are at least going to be with the other male horses, and if I can have a scenario where I can have them around females without the potential of breeding, then I will. So like when I'm riding them, it's not like I ride all the boys and all the girls. I may have two fillies tied up in the arena while I'm riding a stallion or something like that. I do not. I very purposefully do not keep them segregated and all. So in the
Well,
wild, that
there's no fences in nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're supposed to live together, and I think like when you do keep them isolated and then all of a sudden there's a mare, that's when it becomes a huge thing. When there's
Yes,
kind of always
yes.
a mare around, then it's not
Yeah.
nearly as
Well,
uh,
because the mares will keep the boys straight. I've seen plenty of double barrel kicks that keep the boys straightened out.
that's really one. If you have a bad stallion, if you can come up with 6 or 8 brood mares that are pregnant and kick him out with them, they will tend to solve most of his problems for you.
He will be humbled rather quickly. Yes,
uh,
yes.
what about hereditary hierarchy? So this is kind of I've noticed when you, and this seems to be more mare dependent to me than anything else, but if you have one of the more dominant mares in a herd and she has a baby, that baby tends to inherit some of that hierarchy. So it will often wind up being one of the more dominant horses as well, where it's not necessarily physically capable of defending those challenges, but it kind of just gets, the
Yep.
you know
Well,
what I'm
and
getting
you
at
bring
here.
up something that's always been fascinating, and so I'm involved in putting together breeding programs for several clients around the world in different industries. So, there is a definite truth to, obviously we look for physical stamping. So, you're looking for shoulder length and back length and neck length and shoulder angle and all these different things that we're looking for. And yes, you can manipulate that somewhat, through the physical structure. But what you need to realize is just what you said. Behavioral stamping, psychological stamping is very, very much a part of nature's breeding program. Matter of fact, one of the books that I'm going to write in this series is called Nature's Breeding Program, or Breeding by Nature, because we're going to discuss this in great detail. Behavioral genetic stamping is very, very important, and you will have certain horses that hand down behavioral traits and tendencies. And what that really comes down to is they are getting a lot of the mother or fathers, and sometimes you'll see one stamp more than the other. Sometimes you get a horse that doesn't look anything like the dad, but acts the whole heck of a lot like the mom, and you're like, what do we got here? But, and I do agree with you that the brood mares have a more effect, especially on the psychology. They're a psychological effect needs to really be accounted for, because you can make or break, your future star, if that's what you're looking for, by not considering that. But yeah, behavioral genetic stamping is very much a part of it, and that's why you need to know all these little details about your horse, from their emotional intelligence, their sensory efficiency, how well are they able to interpret the outside world into their psyche and respond to it. What are their responses going to be? How efficient is that? How dependent are they on outside or outsourcing to answer the question? How many questions am I going to have to ask in the classroom before I understand the classroom, the topic? Basically, how many of my friends do I need to make me feel comfortable in a certain environment? And you want the horse, if you're going to be breeding, especially for athletes, ideally, obviously, you want the horse that asks the least amount of questions, and that is a natural elevation on the herd structure. That. So yes, it's a big. There's a lot of layers to it, but you bring up a very good point, because it is extremely not just important, but it's just a fact of life that's part of it.
So let me throw a little curveball into that too. I labeled that hereditary hierarchy, and I wasn't really thinking about this until you started talking, but I suppose there's a nurture versus nature argument to be made there. We now live in a world where we have recipient mares and things like that. And so a mare could be raising a foal in an environment, and she has her personality, but there's no genetic relation with that foal. So have you dealt very much with that, and have you seen any correlations of, despite their genetic lack of genetic
Yeah, the
relationship, that the
influence.
colt
Yeah,
still is imprinted
like
personality wise by that dam that he's raised by, but he's not
yeah.
actually related to?
Yeah, it does have an effect. It certainly it can either emphasize or de-escalate the strengths or vulnerabilities of a young horse, depending on their environment. The reactions that their surrogate mom, their adopted mom, has to things, especially when they're young, will play a role. But we have to be careful, because we have to match. We have to be sure that we're actually matching the the surrogate mom, that brood mare, nurse mare, if you will, her psychological capacity and her emotional intelligence level and her sensory efficiency to the young horse, because they can learn bad habits as much as they can learn good habits, that kind of thing. So it's a lot more than just throwing a mare in to babysit. Um, that might not be the it might not be the proper fit for that young horse. We have to really take a look at what that young horse's needs are. If something would have happened to the mother, or the natural mother, who no one knows you like your mom, and if you don't have that available, and you're in a baby, you're stuck with a babysitter, you may or may not be compatible with that babysitter. And so if you are compatible, if we put those horses together thoughtfully, a certain type of psychological composition, if you will, of the young horse with that of the herd dynamic makeup of the broodmare. If those things are compatible, then the young horse has a better chance than average to go on and become who they are, who they would have been. If you don't have that, if you're in an antagonistic relationship with someone who's looking out for you, you're going to be outsourcing a lot more to other horses and your friends. And it's, hey, if you have a little riff with one of your parents, you go to your friends and be like, blah 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 blah, blah, and you don't and you don't want to go back home. Sometimes you're like, I can cut the tension with a knife. And so that relationship kind of holds true for young horses too. So it does have an effect, and it can be a neutral effect, or it can be a negative effect. A neutral effect is just the horses are compatible. I'm not going to screw you up. I'm going to look after you, and I'm the type of surrogate mom that's just not going to really screw you up. But we don't have the same type of relationship as you would with your natural mother. But so the best we can hope for is that, hey, just don't screw me up. It's just, and that's and yeah. So there is a lot of dynamics to that for sure. A lot of layers to that.
I've always thought like there's a veterinarian here not too far from me. He keeps a herd of like 1,600 recipient mares or something, and what they're looking for is the timing of cycles so that this mare is ready to implant at the same time I'm harvesting over on this other mare.
Yeah.
But I know the horse business a little bit, and if I had to come up with a herd of 1,600 horses, the discrimination I could have toward this thing isn't going to be that great. Pretty much I need a uterus, but I don't need the greatest personality or was easy to trim or had a successful record. So it's pretty easy to imagine that in some of those herds, you have some horses that were rejected from other jobs for good reason. And that's why they were available to buy at a reasonable price for the renting of the uterus, right? So
and I always say we have to remember that, everything the horse was, everything the horse is, and everything the horse is going to be is based upon their herd dynamic, their mental structure, their emotional makeup. These are things that we cannot dress up, we cannot hide, we cannot pretty up with an awesome saddle and a blanket and a bridle and all these different things that all the pomp and circumstance. And something else I always remind people, especially my clients who tap me for helping them with their breeding programs, which we've had some great success with, by the way. I'm very happy about what we're coming up with. But I try to remind people that, okay, so we'll just use racing as an example, since I've had vast amount of experience in the thoroughbred racing over the last 20 years. So I have clients contact me and say, hey, I have this mare, and I'm thinking about this stallion because he's got a great race record. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but you have to look at not what the horse did as a competitor, but how they did it. You got to look at all the intangibles, because if you had a horse that won their races or won their competitions through a lot of assists, whether it was certain types of equipment had to be, certain types of things that had to be done to cater to them for training. Like you're talking about a lot of behavioral nuances. When they go to the breeding shed, and of course, thoroughbred racing is live breeding. So when you take a stallion in the breeding shed, he's not going in there with his blinkers and with a shadow roll and with a certain type of, whatever you were using, figure eight, whatever you were using. You're not going in there with that. It's the raw horse. You're not breeding the equipment. So if the equipment help the results, then you can't count on those. That equipment is not going to be bred into the mare, and it's the same, and vice versa. So it's not what the horse accomplished. It's how the horse went about their business of accomplishing it. One of my primary jobs, and I feel one of my strongest responsibilities to the horse, regardless of the industry, especially in a pre-purchase situation, is providing pre-purchase analysis that says, I ask the question of the horses and I let them tell me, do you have the psychological makeup? Do you have the sensory efficiency, the sensory soundness capacity to go through the rigors and demands of even becoming the athlete that you're being purchased for, right? Because if they don't have that, then my job is to protect that horse and protect the owner by, like, don't invest your money in this horse, and let's not put this horse in a situation where they're going to be set up to fail from the beginning, where it's going to be very difficult, where you're going to have to use sedation drugs to get them to just do whatever. Like, you're going to have to constantly put this equipment on You're going to constantly have to over physically train the horse because mentally they can't, they stress out, mental fatigue. They don't have a long enough duration of focus to handle. They don't have a big enough mental cushion to train. So for me, I'm always on the lookout. It's like, okay, I know that I don't give two bits about, and I don't want to cuss on your show, but I'm very passionate about
No,
this.
it's okay.
I don't give a darn about your horse's pedigree or what they look like physically, as far as I don't put either one of those things ahead of who they are psychologically. I don't care. You know how many pretty horses I see that cannot handle the rigors and stresses of being an athlete? They can go so far. I have five-story eventers that that have that capacity, that whose horses can only go to 2 stars. I have high level riders looking for a dressage horse, but the majority of dressage horses can't go to the Grand Prix levels. You have, how many horses do we run through the racing programs that actually make any money or actually win on the racetrack? Like, it's a very, very small number. And yet, what do they all have in common? They all have in common mostly really great breeding, really great bodies, and really great handlers and trainers, and really good people around them. But it's still what's happening. It's still that operating system that's running that machine that manages the mental capacity, controls the physical output. That manages that output, what you're able to do. Now, does that mean that we can have a moderate herd dynamic horse with average efficiency psychologically and outsourcing needs, and kind of a middle herd dynamic that has a lot of talent? Can we still find a way to optimize that talent? Yes. You do not have to be an elite psychological athlete, basically, to be an elite performer. But what that does is, the more needs a horse has, the more holes in their mental makeup, the more questions we're going to have to answer for them, and the more it's going to change your training, it's going to change your approach, it's going to change the way you do things. That's why we cannot cookie cutter every horse. I mean, it's just like you don't coach every little league baseball player the same way. You don't. That's why there's different classes for the same subject in school, because we don't all learn the same way. And so we can't, if we all learn differently, that means we all have to be coached and enriched and nurtured differently. I believe that when you nurture the horse, you can develop the athlete, but the horse comes before the athlete. Simple as that.
Well, I think this is probably a good time to bring in our sponsor for this particular episode, Kerry. And I always search pretty hard to find the right sponsor for the right guest. And for this episode, our sponsor is hitched.net. All equestrians know that finding that new special equine of a lifetime can be frustrating, time consuming, and expensive. You never know who to trust or whether this relationship is going to turn around to bite you on the bottom, literally. For all of your future evaluations, we'd like you to consider using Hitched.net. Hitched is the new app designed to match you with that perfect horse. We'll sort out all the bad matches the way that bad egg sensor in Willy Wonka sent Varunka to the furnace. Hitched uses pedigree history, past behavioral problems, personality typing, the study of whorls and cowlicks, eyelash length, thickness, and girth, star and planetary signs, mood rings, and several other proprietary criteria, and then we also evaluate the horse. Have you ever bought or known someone who got a new horse and then things went sideways a month later? It's definitely not the case of you needing to learn some things and better support the new horse in your life. It's totally the horse and the people who fixed you up with that horse that are to blame. Let Hitched help you by downloading our new app. For only $99.99, we'll tell you whether this new flaxen mane beauty is the right cutie patootie. Is that tall, dark, and handsome bay worth your time of day? Should you give the owners of that halflinger the cash or the finger? Want a pretty prancy palomino, or are you better off with an El Camino? Is this new walker your Texas Ranger, or for peace of mind should they remain a stranger? Is this OTTB going to fill you with glee, or much more likely to break your heart and your knee? For your fancies of flight, we'll let you know to swipe left or swipe right. Trust Hitched.net. Just so you all know, I asked my wife with regards to swiping left or right, which was the accept or reject, and she didn't know. I had to look it up. So I guess that means things are all good at my house. All right. Um, well, I have since we're kind of on hierarchy, I have another question or two for you, and then we'll move on to some other things. But one of the other I don't really consider it an oddity now, but when I first started noticing the pattern I did, is that very often horses that are more dominant with regard to other horses actually work out quite well for beginning riders. And I've always found that to be odd. You would think the more alpha dominant kind of horse would take advantage of the newer rider, and it's definitely not always the case, but oftentimes those horses actually work out very well for the riders who are kind of weak on the leadership end of the scale. And if I have noticed, if I'll take a really submissive horse and put it with a fairly weak rider, that winds it's like two teenage girls fighting back and forth. They just are
It
bickering and
doesn't work
fighting
out.
the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, so what are your thoughts on that? Is there any rhyme to that reason?
Yeah, there is, and of course it's individual horse dependent and the person dependent, but in a general sense, what you're seeing is that a upper herd dynamic horse has less um, outsourcing needs. Okay, so they are able to identify and interpret and respond to the environment without asking a lot of questions, and they have purposeful responses, and so. I guess by proxy, they become more forgiving because they're not looking to outsource to the rider to make decisions nearly as much. So like if you think about they have a very efficient sensory system, which is allows them to be confident, and that's what we see as a confidence is that they're not messing around. Like I know what's happening. You know what I mean? Like you just get that sense that yeah, I can't fool you. They read the room instantaneously and they respond to it with purpose. And we can be that can strike fear into our mental state sometimes because because we're looking at the size of the animal, especially. But the sensory system's job is to it blends the outside world with the emotional horse. It blends the physical world with the emotional horse. It takes the outside world and it brings it into the psyche. The horse needs to process that and then respond to it. So there's a process that takes place there. If that process has interruptions in it, they're going to be like, "Hey, buddy, what do I need to do here? What are we doing here?" And they want the answer right away to feel secure, right? So if they're higher level horses with less gaps in their sensory processing, then they're not asking nearly as many questions. And hey, just get on my back, let's go, basically. And or this is what we're doing. And they will be responsive to certain types of communication, but they're not dependent upon it. Where lower level horses that have a lot more questions in their dialect need a rider that can answer those questions and preemptively anticipate those questions. Higher level horses do not require the rider to anticipate nearly as much. Um, Now, I do a lot of work with creating training programs with high level riders and high level horses, and so there are things that you do to uh, merge these two things together. Really have some incredible it's like getting on a Ferrari. It's like, it changes the game. But just on a term, on the basic level like that's why that happens, and that's what's happening. What you have to be careful of though is we have to be mindful that we're we're not misunderstanding physical expression for dominance. It is not the physical expression. It is what type it is. High level horses will do things purposely. Basically, it'll be more athletic. It won't be reactionary. It'll be responsive. If when you see reactions in a horse, that means that something along the sensory sequence has been interrupted, and the question has not been answered by their other horses as peers or their own associations or you. So um, dominance is emotional. Horses like herd structure is not knitted together by the number of horses. We can't count a number of horses and say it makes up a herd. It is the emotional connection between the animals that makes the herd. So, that is what the binding factor of herd structure is. It's the emotional connection between the horses. So, that's why, like going back to what you said, you have the little pods of herds within. It's because it's where they fit emotionally. And that's something we're going to be covering in the first book. And I do cover in my education program, Institute for Advanced Equine Studies. I have a lecture on the family unit herd structure available on there that I talk about this topic on there. But yeah, but what you're seeing when it comes to that rider is you're seeing a horse that is able to connect the dots themselves with more ease and more efficiency, and they're not dependent upon, there's no mutual dependency in most cases. So yes, that's why that happens.
Cool.
I have a tendency to answer things. If a yes or no answer will do, I'm going to give you the whole paragraph. I apologize for that.
It's fine. I have a similar tendency. I answer the same question 3 different ways from different angles to kind of flesh it out a little bit more. So I get it.
I'm very passionate. I'm very passionate about it, and it's because I don't want to make things seem. I don't want to simplify it so much that it looks to be completely simple, because there is no blanket truth to these things. There's a lot of nuances and a lot of idiosyncrasies that there's more blanket truth to natural herd structure and the natural horses than there are our blending of this with our domesticated world. So we have layered all these things, especially with how we've bred horses. We have interjected all kinds of different psychological things. Sensory inefficiency is one of the most profoundly sad results of our breeding programs, of breeding beautiful horses that have a lot of physical talent that just cannot mentally ever capitalize on that or ever fully fulfill their destiny of hope, because we got to remember that we're breeding horses, but we're breeding psychologies just as much as we're breeding bodies. It's like I someone will send me a picture, and I do a lot of pre-purchase evaluations to help people out. And they'll send me a picture of a horse, and like, oh, isn't he a beautiful horse? I'm going to, he's going to do this and be bred for that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I love horse pictures like anybody else, and yeah, it's a beautiful horse, but I will not sign on or sign off on any horse for you based upon a picture. You know what I mean? I mean, hey, it can be argued that I look good in the picture. Well, maybe, I guess it depends on what you ask, but that doesn't mean that I'm a professional baseball player. I might look good in my uniform. I might look great in my uniform and holding a bat, and you can put me on a baseball card, but that doesn't mean I can play at the major league level.
Yeah. Ask who's the lady that Johnny Depp was just married to. Gorgeous, but she will shit in your bed if she gets mad at you, right? So,
yeah. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of your origins in evaluating horses for purchase or for sale? I know you worked at the Kentucky Derby quite a bit in that. So why don't you give us a little bit about what that looks like?
Well, so as far as pre-purchase evaluations, I get you're talking about like the horse sales and the pre-purchasing young yearlings or weanlings, or evaluating horses at the horse sale. It's interesting because over the years I have had to. The process is very in depth, So if you have, let's just say, and on the average of, if I'm looking at 400 horses, at a sale, the average horses that pass through my initial evaluation process is probably, let's say, 150 of those horses that warrant me going back for a second look. And I'm looking at horses 3, 4, 5, 6 times to go through a process. You can't see everything at one time. I mean, one of the things that I have started doing over the last couple of years, which has been a complete game changer, is I evaluate horses a lot on video. And when I go to horse sales, the naked eye, I can see a lot and I can feel a lot, but not everything, and that's just a point of fact. So to be 100% fair to the horse and 100% fair to my craft and the clients, I will film. So if I'm evaluating your horse, even in person, yes, I'm going to do the evaluation in person, but we're going to film that evaluation process, and I bring that information back to my office here in my laboratory, if you will, and then I begin to do a psychological analysis of the film. And I break that film down in little pieces and you get so many more clues. That's such a vital part of it. So, out of that 150, then we'll begin to whittle that down. When all said and done, by the time a horse, there may be 6 or 7 horses that make it all the way through my process out of 400 to go into the arena for the auction. And at that point in time, I'm still evaluating the horses and watching the process. And I'm the person most well known for saying no for horses to my clients. Like, this is not going to work out. I don't feel good about this. Even though the horse may have been a high ranking horse all through my process, if I start seeing cracks in that, I'm going to do a disservice to the horse by allowing that horse to go through and be put in a situation where I begin to feel that it might not be well made for that. On the other hand, I've also used the film in the process to correct myself, because I have to tell you, you learn more in this business and in anything in life by where you were wrong. I mean, I can tell you that, especially early on, I was wrong about things that I thought I was right about, to the point where it's like, well, geez, how did I miss that? And I've learned so much from that. I've learned so much from my mistakes. And by going back through and keeping a database of thousands upon thousands of horses, keeping a database to track the growth, to identify the characteristics, where did I miss? What did I overlook that was important? How can I make this better? What do I need to do? I constantly reevaluate myself and push myself to find my flaws so that I can be a better advocate for the horses and a better representation representative of my clients, because that is my responsibility to do the service for both. But filming is such an important factor. Now, I evaluate horses right here from my desk from all around the world through film study. And how that all really started was for the Kentucky Derby. In 2011, I had a chance to apply my unique evaluation processes to the Kentucky Derby contenders. And I did it every year, and I've done it every year since 2011, providing a psychological profile of the horses. And through the years, of course, you can track the growth of my work by looking at the archives of the Derby reports, which can be found on our website. If you go to the services and click on Thoroughbred, there's a link there that Daphne has to the archives throughout the time. And if you take the time to go through some of these, you'll see the growth. And that's important to me, because I want people to recognize growth in my work, because you're hiring me to be the best I can. And my job is to always push myself to be the very best and to always learn. I want to be better tomorrow than I am today. I want to be better 6 months from now than I am 3 months from now, that kind of thing. And so you keep pushing your envelope. So I'm actually very proud of the growth that you'll see through the evaluation process and the reports that were written and things like that. But it became so popular that it kind of initially put me on the map. From evaluating the psychologies, I was identifying for the audiences who those horses were. It's like taking a baseball card and looking at the back and seeing all these neat things about, oh, this person grew up here and this person likes the color blue and, likes to eat at Red Lobster or whatever the case may be. I was introducing people to who the athletes were, and it became, I have now an international cult following. And for the past, 10 years now, I've been doing it with Twin Spires Churchill Downs for them and through them. And then we present the report that they offer for sale that handicappers and bettors use around the world to add to their betting options for horses. But I do it to introduce you to who the horses are. What are they? Who are they as athletes? And I try to open the door to understanding horses in a different way, and considering them in a different way, and show them as horses, not just athletes. What makes them tick, kind of thing. And that's become. I do all that I have a high success rate of the winners and the top finishing horses, based upon that, which was put me on the map with the handicappers. But interestingly enough, I don't bet. I don't gamble. I don't bet the ponies. I just study them. And if people, I actually have an online course that is handicapping with the herd dynamics that's very popular. That if you do like that kind of thing, you can go in there and check it out. But I myself do not bet, but I love evaluating the horses. So that whole process through film, and doing that has continued to open up for me. Like I can accommodate more clients. Um, you can send me your film. It's a little bit more cost effective for a lot of people, and things of that nature. So when I can't be someplace, and now even if I am going someplace, I'm still gonna. If I was looking at horses with you, Daniel, I'm still gonna film it because I can focus on a certain things with my own eyes that I now can focus on more with more hypersensitivity and trying instead of trying to see everything. And that's where I was wrong. One of the things I learned that I needed to do better was I needed a more comprehensive way to study this myriad of nuances that are displayed from the horse into the world that we just don't pay attention to unless you have a chance to focus on them specifically. And you can't really do that. You can only do that so far in person, you know? Yes, I can give you a really darn good idea with feel, but I've seen so many horses. I've evaluated 10, 15,000 horses, in person. But so I have a real good idea of what I'm looking for and what I'm looking at and what I'm feeling. But if we're really going to drill down and get the nuances of their psychology, of their sensory efficiency, of their outsourcing needs, and for training and things like that, nothing replaces film because I can take that film and then I study it, and I can study the little things that sometimes happen too fast in person to really get the full scope of. So that has changed everything, and it has increased my success rate, I guess if you will, of being quote unquote correct as much as you can be about horses exponentially. And I've been able to help more clients around the world, and I have identified some of the world's um, most incredible equine athletes, which I'm very proud of.
Um, there's kind of one part of this I'm feeling a little bit of a responsibility to clarify. Earlier, I was talking about more dominant horses often getting along with more novice riders. I do want to say from experience, there is a difference between a top half horse and a top 1% horse. Most of
Yeah,
you do
yeah.
not want a top 1% horse. A
No,
lot of times
no.
that's the Ferrari that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
That is
yeah.
not the horse most people have any business
Well, you bring up a
dealing
good
with.
point because that's very true. And when you get to that top 1%, you're getting into what I call independent nature. And you'll see, and of course, we could do a whole show on independent nature. But again, if your listeners would like to learn more about this type of thing, visit my website, kerrymthomas.com. Centurysoundness.com take you to the same place. But the most recent blog, excuse me, I give a kind of an itinerary, if you will, for references of common used terms and phrases and tips and things like that in that blog, and I talk about a little bit about that. But yes, ideally the best relationship you're going to have is when it's a give and take. So your best horses really are the horses that are not those one percenters as far as compatibility with relationships. They just a lot of those horses just don't really want you around, period, and they have no use for you because your vulnerabilities make them feel a sense of exposure, and so there goes the camouflage out the window. So if you're bringing a sense of exposure to me, I don't want to be around you. You're bringing attention to me that I don't need. Horses that are emotionally intelligent, that are on that upper tier but not at the top levels, they still have enough mutual dependency needs that they're willing to work with you. They can answer the majority of the questions, but they're also willing to accommodate what your intentions are. And we have to teach people that our intentions lead our physical actions. And we should never train a horse and try to coach a horse through physical actions that precede intention. And our intentions, our thoughtful intentions, should precede always a physical action, because if you don't do that, the horse will begin to associate the physical trigger and not anticipate your intention. And you want the horse to move. You want the horse's physical movement to run through your emotional intention. That's when you have mind to body fluency and a nice harmony in motion. And that's when you have a high level of communication. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a very valid point.
Yeah, I've also had the privilege of being involved with some very high level horses that have won lots of money and stuff, and that's not usually the one you want to take for a Sunday afternoon stroll. Kind of, they're usually pretty quirky and only need to be handled by certain types of people and
They those horses fit into a box, if
yeah.
you will.
It's like Michael Jordan when you watch that documentary of him. He may be the greatest of all time, but I don't think I would want him for a neighbor, because he would take that personally.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
Well, I'm realizing I forgot to ask you about one thing, but it still plays with the videos and the evaluation. So, how would you characterize your color blindness as fitting into this whole thing and giving you a literal and figurative different
You
perspective?
know, I tell you, it's for me, it's a blessing. It has been a blessing. So I'll give you a little side banter between my wife and I. She lives her life through colors. She's an interior designer. She's designed by Daphne.com. She's incredible at what she does, but she lives through color. So when we first met, and she realized that she's dating someone and now married to a man who is colorblind. It's just this is how bad it is. Let me tell you a funny story. So yeah, it was about a week and a half ago. She was drinking out of a darker, basically what looked like me like a black coffee cup. Okay, so it was sitting on the Keurig, which is also black, and I like to pamper my wife and make her coffee and things like that. And I'm like, I knew she had a cup, but I couldn't find it. And so she was sitting at the table doing some work, and I was like, "Oh, I'll make you a cup of coffee." "Oh, thank you." Well, I'm looking around, looking around. I'm just like, "Well, didn't you have a cup?" And I'm standing right in front of the Keurig, mind you. And she looks at me like, "Oh my God, it's there." And I'm like, "Where?" So there it is. It's actually in ready to be coffee be made. The cup mug is sitting there, and I couldn't see it until I reached out. And I finally saw it, obviously, after I was looking for it. And then about a week and a half ago, I set my phone down and I could not find my phone. I'm going crazy. I had to leave, couldn't find my phone. I had to call uh, Daphne, who was having a meeting with our event manager, Abigail. And I'm like, I had to call through my I don't want to say it because she'll come on, but Alexa. I had to say, call Daphne. And I said, I can't find my phone. I have to leave here. If you're trying to reach me, I can't find my phone. It's in the house. And I walked around and walked around and walked around here. I had set it down on a dark tabletop that actually had like a black little candy box, like a real dark box on top of it, like a little cigar box. And I couldn't see the darn thing. I mean, how bad is that, right? But for me, evaluating horses, it has allowed me to not be stuck upon their looks. It has allowed me not to identify individuals from afar in a herd by their phenotype markings. I had no other choice. And the only way I could even do it was to begin to identify not what they looked like, but how they were acting, how they were communicating, how they communicated with each other, their physical reactions or responses to certain types of stimuli, how long it took them to quote unquote calm down if something startled them. That's also a very big measuring stick for a horse's stress tolerance levels is, how long is the ripple effect? Where does that ripple effect stop? Who is the absorber? And all these different things. And that allowed me to really um, focus upon the emotional confirmation, if you will, as opposed to the physical confirmation. And that's the only way I've ever evaluated horses was from that lens. It's through that lens of who, not what. So I don't have any input. The other thing I think I've always said was a big benefit for me is that I was not raised in the horse industry. Now, I said in the beginning, one of the things that surprised me was that I'm actually working in the horse industry, which I obviously love, but it was not an original passion. I was not raised around horses. I got infected with the wildlife bug thanks to Mutual of Omaha and Marty Stauffer and my dad, being outdoorsmen and living in the country. And, I could walk out back behind my house and walked for 4 miles before I came to another road. I mean, it was great growing up, and it's still there. So I was living in the country, and my big fancy was to be a researcher, a zoological researcher for predators, and I wanted to specifically focus on cats. I wanted to go to Africa and study the lions. I wanted to study the mountain lions and out west, and so on and so forth. And oh, by the way, in my processes of teaching myself how to do that, um, then I became in fact fascinated with holy crap, those horses out here. Well, how do these horses survive with no humans and no fences, Um, and then that has they were part of the ecosystem. They were part of I was studying the environment. And I always believe two things. If you really want to understand a species, you need to spend time understanding and learning about the environment in which they're designed to live. And so being exposed to the horses in their natural in the natural environment, maybe not their natural environment. They ended up there somehow, but it's a natural environment without fences, without human interference for the most part. I mean, I would be up in 5, 6 miles away from humans, and so to me, not just studying the horses, but studying and learning about the environment, that was my laboratory. And so that, and then being colorblind on top of that, I had to be hypersensitive to that environment to even survive because, I was also a prey animal for certain species. And so it changes your whole perspective. It really does. And so having the chance to cut my teeth, if you will, just completely from the raw of no guidance, but just an open template of learning. And God bless me if I survive out there in that wilderness for the 3 months or time that I would spend there. That perspective has taken that perspective and then bringing it to domestication. I was shocked, Daniel, if I have to be honest. When I first started to find ways to translate what I was learning to our world, I started off with the therapy programs. I love working with kids. I'm very passionate about helping children and families in need, and horse and human wellness programs are dear to my heart. And so I took on management of a not-for-profit at a local place here that was just starting up. And that's how I began to blend the emotional part of the horse with the emotional needs of people. What I found was in curating and finding, rescue horses and things the animals that we brought into the program were mostly, OTTBs and kickoffs, if you will, outcasts that no one else had use for. I was left with, oh my God, I got to unravel this, and please don't kill me in the process, but I'll figure it out. I learned everything on my own 2 feet, and in the environments that I was in through the horses, through different experiences. And so I think that has helped me a great deal throughout my career for sure. Because I wasn't taught how it was supposed to be and why. I didn't have a human mentor over top of me that says, this is how you put the saddle on, this is how you train a horse, this is what you're looking for. I had none of that. You know, I learned everything through Mother Nature. So that's why I look at horses the way I do.
Mm-hmm. Gives you dogma repellent there. You don't make the same mistakes everybody's been making for a long
Well,
time without
there's
questioning
a
it.
thing. Yeah, there's like that confirmation bias. It's like, well, I assume it to be, so it's going to be. Well, there's not always truth to that, and I can piss off a lot of people, but um, so be it. My responsibility is to the horses, and if it makes you upset along the way, then I can't help you. You know what I mean? Just like I'm going to look after your horse.
One of the things I was reflecting on as you were talking here is that of all the times I've ever had somebody contact me and they're looking for a horse or they want an evaluation or something, like what's the list that you get? I'm looking for a 15 hand
Yeah,
bay gelding, and every single thing they're about to throw at you is going to be a physical attribute. They're not going to say, I want a horse that's easy to get along with.
yeah,
They're not going to pick the personality and all. It's all going to be from the physical side of things. One of my funny lines whenever I have somebody that shows up at a clinic with a real pretty horse that they're having a lot of trouble with is that, if we can't get this sorted out, at least they'll make a hell of a rug in front of the fireplace, right? That's what you really bought them for. You weren't paying attention to, there are ugly-headed horses that are real easy to get along with, right? Don't throw them out just because they weren't the right color or the right whatever.
Yep. So some of the best horses that I've ever worked with are just a brown paper bag. That brown paper bag. The other thing too that I find myself over the years that I began to evaluate for people is like injury risk, because by assessing a horse's psychological psychology and their sensory efficiency, it tells you a lot about how hard are they going to be on their physical bodies. Because if they have a sensory system and a psyche that's very reactionary, like there are horses that have physical flaws, and most horses do, that you can either get away with more likely than others, depending on their psychological makeup. Basically, and it's, of course, discipline specific as far as what their physical demands are going to be for the most part, but there's a direct line between emotional stress and physical injury. And so, just like with people, and it's not just an ulcer. There's physical injuries that happen because horses are becoming very reactive to certain stimuli. Well, you need to know that if you have a horse that's got, something off on some part of their body, whether their pastureings are not the right, too much flex, not enough flex. Just any number of things, tendons, angles, hocks, all this kind of shit that goes into physical horses. Very few horses have offset knees, they toe in, toe out, all these different things. How much, how offset is the knee? How much pressure are they going to put? What types of physical pressures is their psychology going to put upon them? Additionally, that is over and above the physical demands. These are very, very important factors to especially finding athletes. So I'm not just looking for the athlete who can mentally handle the rigors and demands of becoming, your dream horse for what you want to do. I'm also looking at I'm comparing it with their physical structure that says, well, what is their injury risk? Are they going to put undue stresses on themselves in this process that's going to weaken further this particular part of their body that they already have a physical structure problem with? Or I have also found horses like Runhappy was a Breeders' Cup champion, horse of the year, that kind of thing. When he was a yearling, without going into too much proprietary knowledge because there's non-disclosure agreements involved, but he had a physical issue and in one of his particular limbs that many people were put off by. Many high-end vets were put off by. The vet we were working with is absolutely probably the best vet I've ever worked with in my life. And if you want a good vet, you can contact me privately and I'll give you his name. But he is a brilliant man. He was able to combine the psychological evaluation with what he was looking at, and we would talk it through. And I said, Runhappy, the horse that became Runhappy, the Super Saver colt, was not going to put pressure on his body. This horse, if a horse is leaking, it's all about how a horse distributes their emotional energy. And if they're leaking emotional energy in different spots, they're going to have a lot of down pressure. If I watch a horse move, okay, I'll also close my eyes and listen to how that horse is moving. How they're hitting the ground tells you a lot. Going in your arena and putting some poles down and looking at the footfalls over top of a grid pattern. Okay, see if the horse can consistently put their feet in the same place, going all the way around the arena and go over 3 poles in the same spot. Rake it out each time and see where their footfalls are. See if there's consistency in that movement. That tells you how efficiently their sensory system is clearing space over what duration of time. So by the time it takes them to get around the arena, are their footfalls still consistent every single time that they go over top within, an inch or 2 or 3 inches? I always say within a hoof length, or half of a hoof within the same steps, the same box, the same spacing away from each pole. That tells you that your horse is moving fluently through the environment. If that thing changes every single time, they're not moving fluently. That simple thing is your first building block to creating mind to body fluency with you and your horse while they're moving. It's just to get that harmony over a duration of time, they can get around the arena 3 times and put their footfalls in almost the exact same spot over those rails. And at the same, now, mind you, of course, this is predicated upon your same tempo and your same gait. But keeping that same gait, that gives you that. And that tells you that the horse is either putting down pressure, they're losing emotional energy through the bodies into the ground. Some horses lose emotional energy up through the bodies at different angles. You'll see how their posture is moving. But that footfall has a lot to do with their physical structure and how well they're going to take care of themselves. And so I looked at, I couldn't do this type of test at the horse sale, obviously, but I did pay very close attention to how emotional energy was being distributed through his body. And I said, he is not displacing an exorbitant amount of energy through his feet. His emotional energy is not down pressure, it's forward. So he is very light on it. He's very agile. To use a coin from my late father, be dish rag loose. We played sports. Be dish rag loose, boy. Don't be tense. And so that tells you a lot about your athletic potential in a horse. It doesn't matter how strong that horse is. If that energy is being displaced in a non-athletic tone, then guess what? You just have a big, strong horse that's going to rabbit jump over that jump, or it's going to bunny hop, or it's not going to be able to finish the race, and so on and so forth. So that another key use for my evaluation process is to help people understand the risk potential for their horses. And insurance companies like to contact me for that before they insure a horse. Good. Or whether or not you should insure your own horse. What's the likelihood of my investment? Am I looking at a risk here?
Yeah, that does seem to be that there are definitely horses that are accident prone, like they are constantly getting themselves into something and getting banged up, and yeah, that there's patterns to that stuff for sure. Well, I don't. We are coming up on noon for you right now. We can wrap this up.
Unfortunately, I know. Yeah, I as those who know me know, some people don't know, I am a caregiver for my mother, and so I work my life and my world and my schedule around my mom's care. I only got one mom, take care of her first, and I'm heading to duty here before too long. So, but this has been great. I mean, I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation, and we could just keep on going. And maybe that means we have to have a round 2 at some point in time.
Absolutely, we will. And we'll definitely have links to all of your stuff, your website. You've got a podcast now. I'll hit that. That is Beyond the Hoof, and you answer questions and things like that. Have conversations with your wife, and then Destination of Hope, where you're talking more some international issues and so forth. Your various books. So we'll have links to all of that stuff in the show notes for everybody. And Kerry, I certainly thank you for your time this morning.
I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed it. And anytime I get a chance to share my passion with another passionate and a high-level horseman like yourself, I really respect you and appreciate it. And I think for people who are going to have questions about my work, that's certainly common. I would encourage you again to visit my website, and I think you'll get a lot of really answer to a lot of your curiosity questions by taking a look at the blogs. You'll see different things on the website, other podcasts, this show, other things. And if you have a question, send us, sign in. You don't have to book in a signature service of a full evaluation. You can tap me very conveniently and cost effectively just by requesting a consultation with me, and we'll video consult. There's lots of different ways to get in touch. Lots of different ways that I can help you, and that we can learn together and continue to make the horse world a better place.
Well, very good. Again, we'll have links to all of that. So I certainly appreciate it, Kerry, and we'll definitely have you back on some point in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.